Okay, shkoyach. So, Baruch Hashem, welcome. Shalom. New Perek Hey of the Tanya, the 5th chapter of the Tanya. This is going to be an unbelievable section of Tanya. It's a new concept, Bigadol, and it's essentially the extremely powerful, transformational nature of learning Torah. Where the Baal Tanya explains in wondrous illustration what it means to learn Torah and how the mitzvah of learning Torah is different than all the other mitzvahs. Nothing compares to it. We see this in the other Sfarim HaKadoshim, but the way the Baal Tanya explains it is wondrous. It's going to be very mind-expanding, and we're not even going to take any substances. Yeah, that's the way to do it the natural way. And the Torah is going to, the Baal Tanya explain, and you're going to see your brain start expanding as he brings these concepts for us. And this is a very, very, one of my favorite chapters. I know I say that every single chapter, but this is really one of my favorite chapters of the Baal Tanya. And I think after you learn this, you're never going to look at Torah ever again the same way. You're never going to look at anything, any mitzvah the same way, by now seeing the world through the lens of what Torah learning really is. So let's jump in. Perikei, u'l'toisefes ber. Let's explain deeper something that Elijah the prophet said. We're just coming off Pesach, so we're all high from the teachings and from the Torah of Eliyahu Navi. So Eliyahu Navi says, Ber heitev loshen tfisa. Let's explain very well, Ber heitev loshen tfisa. Sha'amar Eliyahu, that Eliyahu Navi said, Leis machshava tfisa bach klal. That there's no machshava, there's no thought that can tfisa. Anybody know what that means? To grab, to catch on, to be tofes, to grab you at all. So the simple meaning of what Elijah is saying, this is in the Hakdama Tikkun Zohar, is that anybody who says, do you know, I know God. Let me tell you all about him. I figured him out, I know God, I totally grasp everything that God's all about. What should you do at that point? You run the opposite way as fast as you can. Because Elijah the prophet told us, and he knows more than that yokel that's claiming that he knows God, that nobody can say that I grabbed on to God, that I get God, because we're talking about God being infinite and our mind being finite. So there's no machshava, there's no mind that could say that he grabbed God, he chaps, he gets God fully. This entire chapter is going to be that there is an exception to that, called Torah. But before we get there, the simple meaning is no mind can say that I grabbed God. Okay? One of the main points we have to understand in this, you're learning a piece of Zohar. The Baal Tanya is just quoting the Zohar and he's explaining the Zohar. We generally don't just open up Zohars, in Shana Aleph. Just, learn that b'chavrusa. But we do learn how the Baal Tanya understood the Zohar, and how the Nefesh HaChaim understands the Zohar, and how Rabbi Nachman understands the Zohar. We see the Zohar through the lens of the tzaddikim. So one of the things we're going to have to look at is, why did Elijah use the word tfisa? Why didn't Elijah the prophet say, there's no mind that understands you, there's no mind that is yoidea, is maving you? Why did Elijah use this kind of interesting word that should stick out to us? That's what he says, ber heitev loshen tfisa. Why did Elijah use, there's no mind that grabs you? Why did he use that word? As opposed to, usually the way we talk is, there's no mind that can figure you out fully. There's no mind that fully can piece together you. It's a funny word to use. But if Elijah the prophet used that word, it means that there's a reason why he used that word. So, okay, hold on to your tzitzis. He's about to go, Baruch Hashem. this point, everyone just wears tzitzis, so it's posh. It's not even like, oh, the one guy that's not wearing. He's like, oh no, I'm not the one. I don't have tzitzis to grab on it. Baruch Hashem. It was cute with my son before he got tzitzis, and when a kid is 3, now he's older, but when a kid is 3 and you haven't had your upshare, so you're in a year of kids that half have tzitzis kippah payas and half have no tzitzis, no kippahs, no payah. And then like one by one, the kid comes in the next day like, bing, boom, doo, and like, whoa, and he gives out candy, it's a whole thing. But when you're 2/3, you're already learning all the things about davening, you're learning how to, so what do you do when you get to the bracha of tzitzis? Like, what do you do? You're saying Shema, and you're kissing the tzitzis. So the kids that are 2, and 3, up to 3 minus a day, they grab their friends' tzitzis. And they kiss. So when they get to the kissing of the tzitzis, they're like, can I kiss those tzitzis for a second? And then one by one, they all have their own tzitzis. So that's sort of what's happening here. B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so hold on tight. Look what he's about to do. He's about to explain essentially how your brain, but essentially how consciousness itself works. Hine, kol seichel, your mind, kishemaskil umasig. The word maskil means to understand something in Chachma. If you were here with us last Zman, the 4th chapter, we explained what Chachma is, that it's like a flash when you grasp something, but you don't yet have all of the detail of that idea. It's not yet clear to you. For example, you go to a shir, the Rebbe says something, you're like, I got it. And your chaver says, so tell me, what's the pshat? He says, 1 second. And now I could say it. That's called Bina. Bina is, let me work it, all the points out and all of their majesty, that it's now clear to me. So maskil means Chachma, umasig means Bina. So in your mind, Chachma is something, and Bina is something, okay? A concept, anything. Give me a concept right now, anything. Probably something a little bit more profound than just, Pepsi.
The chain of worlds up to Hashem.
Okay, that's a pretty good one. The chain of universe is up to Hashem. Hishtalshel Sailams. That's the opposite extreme. The most profound thing you can possibly think about. Hishtalshel Sailams. So, maybe something in the middle. Yeah? Math. Well, I should use something Torah did.
The energies of Dibor.
Okay, that's also pretty up there. Oh, Hashem, you had a good Benizman. Thinking about good things. Let's talk about a sukkah. A sukkah. That a sukkah is not allowed to be more than 20 amas. Everyone knows that halacha? A sukkah, if it's more than 20 amas, according to Chacham, it's possible. So, when your mind, if I tell you that halacha, do you know that a sukkah is not allowed to be more than 20 amas high? Approximately 30 something feet. Yeah, it's clear? You got it? So, the first thing when I said sukkah, okay, wait a second. And then you start working on what amas are, and you start picturing in your mind, what would that look like, and you start why can't you 120 amas, and all of a sudden the Gemara start coming into your brain. That's already in Bina. Chacham is just the idea. Sukkah can't be 120 amas. Got it. So now you've maskiled and you've masiged something. Bisichloi eze muskal, some concept. Okay, pay attention, every word here is gold. Hare haseichel toifes. This is very important. You see that word, toifes? Your mind grabs esa muskal umakifoi bisichloi. Your mind grabs on to the concept and envelops the concept, swallows up the concept, and the concept becomes literally grabbed, just like when I grab something, you use that as an analogy. Imagine this was smaller than my hand, this would be engulfed. So now imagine your mind, when I tell you the sukkah can't be more than 20 amas, imagine your mind swallowing this idea, grabbing it and swallowing it, completely enveloping it. And you start to the degree that you grasp it, it starts integrating deeper and deeper and deeper into your consciousness. So you're literally grabbing it and you're enveloping it. You're mastering it. Because who's the master when you grab something? The pen or who's the master here? Me or the pen?
You.
The one that's around is the master, and the one that's within has become enveloped, is becoming integrated. I don't say that the one on the inside is the master. The one that grasped it is now the master and is enveloping this idea. Now, when we talk about something like a concept, obviously this is not going to be a full mashal, because to the degree that I can hold on to this, it never becomes my hand. But a concept, the more that I grasp onto it, the more it becomes integrated within me. Literally becomes swallowed up and integrated into me. A part of me. Okay? Now, the reason why the Rebbe said that there's two levels, yeah.
Can't that relationship sometimes though be mutual? I mean, obviously if it's Hashem and us, he grasps us, but a man and wife would grasp each other. No?
Beautiful. So you're already at step 2, which was exactly the Baal Tanya is going to get there. Yeah, you're already thinking Tanya Dik. So yes, we're first building up the concept of grabbing something, and to the degree that I've grasped it, it's going to become integrated more and more and more into my consciousness. If I hear something on the surface, like a sukkah cannot be more than 20 amas high to be kosher, so that's integrated maybe slightly. But to the degree that I really start thinking about that, I can pull it deeper and deeper and deeper into my consciousness. And you're going to have a much deeper understanding of sukkahs if you were to learn the entire Masechta Sukkah. That's going to be deeply integrated into you. Okay? Veha muskal. Muskal means the concept that you are now thinking about. Nitpas has been grasped, or let's speak a little bit of Yiddish, gechapt, has been chapt. Gechapt means it was chapt by you. You chapt it. It was gechapt. It got gechapt. Umukaf, and it's surrounded. Umelubish. These are very Hasidic words. It is cloaked. B'toich haseichel. It's cloaked by your mind. Shehesigoi v'haskiloi, that grasped it and understood it. Both chachmad and binad it. Okay? Now, we use the mashal of an analogy of me grabbing this pen, but is the analogy fully accurate? Why not? We already mentioned one reason.
It's not a part of it.
Because not part of me, another proof is that I could just simply remove it. It's not integrated. But your mind, it's just an analogy. It's a good analogy, but an analogy is never the reality, otherwise it would not be an analogy. An analogy is something to teach you about reality. So the analogy, you always have to take a jump to pull you into the reality. So the analogy is such that I can see that getting an idea is an integration, an enveloping or wrapping around something, but where it's not the full nimshal, the reality, is that when I grasp something in my intellect, to the degree that I can chachma and bina it, it starts becoming one with me. It starts integrating into me. It starts unifying with me and becoming the fabric of my mind. And to the degree that I understand it, that I chap it, it becomes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. For example, this shir itself, right now it's still just it's like the beginning of the seed. But as you leave, and as you go walking around, and as you go eat your schnitzel later, or whatever we're going to do, it starts percolating and integrating. And you're going to be in a much different place next year, in a much different place 10 years, and 120 years. How deep these concepts will integrate. Okay? Okay, but now we go another step. Vegam, this is where it gets really good. Vegam haseichel. But what happens to your mind? It seems that it's one directional, like Avi was saying. is that it's me grabbing the idea, right? So this is the concept, this is me. It seems that I'm the master here. But what happens to my mind when I grasp the idea to such a degree that I become captivated by it? Sometimes you could hear something and you get it, but it doesn't quite captivate you. The proof being you walk out of class and you're just like, no, what's for dinner? When an idea captivates you to such a degree, not only do you envelop the idea, you ready what's going to happen? The idea envelops you. You become enveloped in the concept. You lose yourself in the concept. Vegam ha-seichel, your mind becomes melubish, cloaked, bemuskel, in the very idea, at the same time that you're grasping the idea, and to the degree that you really grasp it, it's becoming integrated into you. But to the degree that you integrate it and become captivated by it, all of a sudden you become inside of it. You all of a sudden realize that you're inside of a sukkah. That's why I always tell this, when I was learning in the Mir, one of my first zmanim, we were learning sukkah. And in the Mir, a big part of it is you just dissolve into Torah. There's nothing else. There's no mirrors in there. It's called the Mir, but there's no mir. There's some tzaddikim there, I don't even know what they look like. I remember one tzaddik, he came to somebody and said, there's a picture of him on the wall. He was like, who's that? And he said, that Tazrei. It was him. There's nothing but Torah there. Now, that doesn't mean people are going to think, but so he had a mustard stain, he never had a mustard stain, his wife would have told him, he looked fine, looked presentable. Okay? And it's not a halacha shir right now, and the halachas of looking in a mirror. That's we'll give it another shir. However, in the mirror, there's an element of just losing yourself in Torah. There's nothing else there. You can't hold on to anything because it's only Torah. So I remember we were learning sukkah, and you stop, you're eating, you're just learning sukkah. You like someone has to remind you to go down. It's like it's lunchtime. Now here it's yeah. You barely remember. Maybe you get something to eat afterwards. I remember at one point I was in the basement for a very long time, and I hadn't been outside, literally into the world of the outdoors for I don't even know how long. Everything was sukkah. I remember I walked outside, and we were learning the sugyas of what can be used as a wall for a sukkah. The Gemara talks about the animals. All of a sudden I looked outside, everything became a sukkah. The walls of the buildings around me, what if it's sukkah? What if I put schach between those two buildings? And the people walking, are they good sukkah walls? Moving sukkah wall. Because the more time, could you use animals for a sukkah wall? What if the animal passes away on sukkahs, then you rigor mortises, and you lose your amount of shear of the wall? What's good? I just saw sukkahs everywhere. Is that kosher schach? Is it not kosher schach? Is that mechuber l'karka still? Can I use? Everything was. I saw a bamboo thing. If I take the bamboo and then everything became. I felt myself like the world became a sukkah. Mamish. I was in a sukkah. So that's what it means. That at first, to the degree that you get it, you start grabbing sukkah, sukkah, sukkah. You're the master. But all of a sudden you flip and you start to see yourself inside the idea. That only happens when you really become captivated by a concept. When you become deeply involved in something and it grabs you. Okay? That's called your thoth. It chapped you. You were farchapt entirely by the idea because the idea was profound. And it grabbed you. Now, what's very powerful here is when we're talking about Torah, we're talking about God. Because God and the Torah are one. Which means, when you learn halacha, what's halacha? Literally God's will. And is God and His will one? Yes. God and His will are one.
Isn't the Torah just one chain of Shem?
Yes, it's all like the Ramban points out, that the entire, all the Shishim Ribai Oisius L'Torah is all Shem Hashem. It's all God's name, because all the Torah is God's will. The Torah existed before the world. The Torah is God's primal thought and will for creation. And the mystery of such, which is from last chapter, is that Hashem took that will and He cloaked it in things of this world. Like put on your right shoe before your left shoe. That's the undiluted will of God, that when you're able to do that and even think about that, you are involved in the will of God, which is one with God Himself. Which means when I take a concept of Torah and I think about it, essentially what am I doing? I'm ingesting, obviously there's nothing physical here, I'm integrating and ingesting the wisdom of the infinite into me. And at the same point, to the degree that I ingest it and become captivated by it, I become inside of God. And then the more I ingest, I become, and there's a double enveloping, there's a double wrapping, a double unification, which is it's called a yichud nifla. It's a wondrous unification that does not exist like this in any other thing. Certainly not in the physical world. Because I can grasp this. But can the pen grasp me at the same time that I'm grabbing it? It's impossible. Only it can go one direction. But when I talk about conceptually how your mind works, you can grasp, and to the degree that you integrate and grasp something, that it captivates you and grabs you, there's a double enveloping that's happening. And when we talk about in grasping Torah, we're talking about grasping, that's why Eliyahu says, Tfisa bach klal. There's no one can grab you except through Torah. Through Torah, you're literally grabbing, so to speak, God, and He grabs you. It's a double enveloping, a double wrapping, a double unification. And there's no unification that's as intimate as that. And therefore, one of the most important things when it comes to Torah, to using your brain, is if your brain works this way, then a very good idea to use it for grasping God, that God should grasp you. As opposed to really thinking deeply about other things. I always use this guy. He's probably getting a big aliyah from the whole thing, but he comes into almost every Tanya Chapter. But if I think about Biggie Smalls a lot, maybe he's alive, you know. If I think about him a lot, to the degree that I'm grasping, I'm integrating him, all of a sudden, Biggie, you're inside of Biggie. It's like, oh no, whoa, Biggie, that's too intense. Then you envelop, and it's a double enveloping of Biggie. It's a little bit too much Biggie, for comfort. So that's why it's a big problem, because the yeshiva guys are really smart. So they hack about stuff, and they really integrate things. So make sure you're not hacking too much about like spicy mayo. And you're like, this is like, the way they make this, with like the kvetches. All of a sudden, like you're in like spicy mayo. Like you jump, spicy mayo came into you, and all of a sudden you're like swimming in spicy mayo because you integrated such a muscle so deeply. So don't fetch so much over, Pepsi Cola, Narishkeit. Use it to grab God, literally. This is going to be so profound that it's inconceivable how profound it gets. Every bit of Torah you learn is this double enveloping, this wondrous unification. The Baal HaTanya is going to give us examples of this, how everything that you learn in Torah is the most wondrous yichud with Hashem that does not exist with any other mitzvah. We should be subject to this. Amen. It's good to have the Oivim back.